Good morning, everybody, and you're all very welcome to the latest in MyMind's series of webinars. My name is Gráinne O'Rourke and I'm Head of Communications at MyMind, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here this morning for this event, which we're doing in collaboration this morning with the Good Limbo. I know some of you may have attended our collaboration with 50808 a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully you found that helpful, and hopefully you will find this one equally helpful today. So I'm just going to cover off a couple of little housekeeping bits before the event proper kicks off. So first and foremost, to remind people who haven't been at a MyMind event before, we do record the webinar. It's recorded anonymously, so you can't see anybody except the presenters, and that will go up on our YouTube channel probably by the middle of next week, but you will get an email through Eventbrite letting you know and telling you also what the link is. Also, just to say that even though we all think now that we're great experts with the technology, sometimes still things go wrong. Hopefully nothing will go wrong this morning, but we would ask you to bear with us because we are at the mercy of Wi-Fi, etc. And then just to talk a little bit about the presentation. So my colleague Muireann Walsh from the Good Limbo is going to talk first about the Good Limbo, what it is, what it does, and what supports you can expect from it. I'm then going to cover a few short slides about MyMind and what we offer, and then I'll be handing over to my colleague Vincent Ryan, who is a psychotherapist with MyMind, and he will kick off the discussion on identifying feelings. Also, to let you know, as normal, there is a Q&A function, and if questions occur to you during any of the presentations, please don't be shy, put them into the chat box, and we will have a Q&A session at the very end, and hopefully we will have some interesting discussion coming out of that, and also we'll get as many questions as possible covered. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome this morning my colleague Muireann Walsh from the Good Limbo, and Muireann is now going to talk to us about the Good Limbo and what it does. So good morning, Muireann, and I'm handing over to you now.
Thanks, Gráinne. Good morning, everybody. I'm Muireann and I run the Good Limbo. The Good Limbo, I'd like to thank Gráinne and Vincent from MyMind for having us here this morning. Thank you very much. The Good Limbo is an online mental health community for peer-based support and distraction. So you might be wondering, what is peer support? Peer support is the support and understanding that those lived experience of mental health can give to one another. So it's not a replacement for professional support like MyMind offers, but it can be a complementary support. So sometimes people might not be quite ready to reach out for professional support, and they might like to talk to people who've been there who can reassure them. Or sometimes you might be getting professional support and you might like a place to decompress in between sessions or a place to chat. So whatever stage you're at, we're here. Our members communicate with each other via forums and live chat. We have space for seeking support, and we also have rooms for chit chat and distraction. We also have an arcade, and we run monthly tournaments where our members can play games against each other. And on our website, we have user-generated content such as podcasts and blog posts, which are available via our website. The Good Limbo is completely free to use. It's available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We even had a voice chat last Christmas Day. We have over 500 members from around the world, and there are 2,000 messages exchanged daily in our live chat. We are peer-led and moderated, and we encourage our members to share ideas and suggestions so that we're offering the kind of support that they want and need. We recently conducted a survey with our members. The majority of members who responded reported that they had decreased or stopped using unhealthy coping mechanisms. They had increased their use of healthy coping mechanisms. They were more likely to work with professionals or reach out for professional support. They had improved self-esteem. The Good Limbo makes them feel supported, listened to, understood, safe and connected. They feel better informed about mental health and mental health supports, and that the Good Limbo has had an overall positive impact on their mental health. If you'd like to join the Good Limbo or get more information, you can find us at thegoodlimbo.com. Now I'm going to show you a video that I think explains our community really nicely.
Because sometimes we forget the obvious. Because sometimes you want a distraction. Because sometimes all you need is a hug. Because sometimes it helps to know you're not alone. Goodlimbo.com is an online mental health community for peer-based support. We are here because we've been there.
Thank you very much for listening. Now I'm going to hand you back to Grania.
Fantastic presentation, Warren, and thanks a million. That video was excellent, and I think gives all our attendees this morning a good idea of what it is we are all about and what the Good Limbo is all about. So delighted with that. So I'm going to very quickly now run through some slides about MyMind. This is obviously particularly for people who have not had any interactions with us before, and it will give you an idea of the services. And then I won't take too long about it because I really want to get to the meaty part of this morning's presentation, which is our talk about identifying feelings. So without further ado, I'm going to run to the slides now, which I think should be live on your screen. So for those who are not aware, MyMind was set up in 2006, and its mission really is about identifying and bridging the gap between public health services in the mental health space and the private sector, which can often be too costly for people who are in need of mental health counselling and therapy. We're a social enterprise, so we're all about business for impact, and we're a not-for-profit. We're also an organisation that focuses on early intervention, so we're very much about people who are feeling a bit anxious, a bit down, a bit depressed, and getting you to look at that in a meaningful way through a therapeutic journey with a counsellor before it becomes a more serious problem that might require some kind of medical intervention. What makes us different from other providers and just generally different in the sector is that oftentimes you need to have some kind of a referral in order to avail of psychotherapy. Particularly with the public sector, you can directly refer to MyMind services, and aside from the fact that this makes the process a lot quicker, it also means that you are taking ownership of your own recovery journey. So you're making the decision to look for help, and you're making the decision to take the action to reach out to MyMind. Under normal circumstances, our appointment turnaround is very quick. I'm sure people will appreciate, though, that with COVID, things are a bit slower because there's a huge demand for the services at the moment. But I do ask that you bear with us if you are looking to get through to us, and you can phone the office or email the office if you're having a difficulty, and they'll be more than happy to help you. We're very fortunate that we have a multidisciplinary, multicultural and multilingual team available to us. So at the moment we have over 120 therapists of different methodologies and persuasions working with us, and we're currently delivering in 15 languages. So this means obviously that we can offer supports to people who perhaps might not otherwise be able to get access to counselling services. At present, we have a scaled system based on a person's ability to pay on foot of their employment status. So the most expensive is €50, which I think you will agree compares favourably with other service providers. And that is if you are in full employment. If you're in part-time employment, the rate is €30, and then we have a fully discounted rate of €20 for people who are unemployed, people who are full-time students, and those who are retired or for seniors. And the top rate of €50 subvents our ability to discount the lower rate, because we're all about our social mission, and this is very important to us. MyMind has its own technology platform. So during COVID, for example, and probably out into the future as people got used to the technology, we have been providing the video parts of our service on our own platform. So you're not using Google or Zoom or Microsoft Teams or anything else. And the other thing that the system allows is for everything is integrated. So you can book your appointments, you can pay for your appointments, you can reach out to your therapist, etc. And also all of the information is held securely and confidentially, because obviously we're very mindful of our clients' sensitivities in this regard, and we're fully compliant with GDPR and all of the data protection rules. We offer a range of services, as I've already mentioned. So as you can imagine, the most frequent is at the individual level, where you have one-to-one counselling and psychotherapy. But we also offer couples counselling, family therapy, child and adolescent, and we also have some workshops that we deliver in the workplace. And in fact, on the child and adolescent area, we have recently begun a project with the Irish Youth Foundation in that area, so we're very pleased with that.
MyMind is working for a future where everyone is able to access timely and affordable mental health support when they need it. MyMind is a mental health not-for-profit which was founded in 2006 with a very clear mission in mind: to make mental health services accessible and affordable for everyone. Our services have had a very positive impact on the mental health of our clients all over Ireland and beyond. How do we do this? In a number of ways. Firstly, we offered a tiered rate system based on a person's employment status. Therefore, we only charge affordable fees. So regardless of your employment status, you can afford to attend at MyMind. Secondly, we also believe in making the service accessible. So from the initial call or contact, you usually won't have to wait more than 72 hours for an appointment. We provide face-to-face sessions which take place in our network of centres in Cork, Dublin and Limerick. Since the beginning, we have also provided our services online and over the phone. This has had a very positive impact on the people who are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, that situation has had a damaging effect on people's mental health. Our services also impact very positively on the lives of our immigrant communities, as we provide our services in 15 languages. This means that we can make a real difference in the lives of immigrant populations all over the country. At present, MyMind is providing an average of over 32,000 appointments per year to over 5,000 clients. We know from our clients that our services are having a real and lasting impact on them and their wider families and communities. MyMind believes that mental health is just as important as physical health, and we believe that early intervention is essential in order to avoid more serious difficulties down the line. We are proud to be making a difference in our communities.
The other thing I wanted to let people know about is that we have received funding from Sláinte Care and the HSE for free appointments for those people affected by COVID-19. That project has been running since June of 2020. And we have been fortunate that it has been extended until the end of September. So if you want to find out more information about that, please visit our website at mymind.org. And these are all the contact details. Obviously, there's no need to take them down now, but for anybody who wants to watch the video back next week, all of these will be here. But all our information is available on mymind.org. So I am now going to hand over in a moment as he gets ready his slides to my colleague Vincent, who I think is putting his slides into the system there now. And we are going to have a chat about identifying feelings. And once Vincent is finished, we'll have a little bit of a discussion around some of the issues being raised by his slides, and then we very much welcome your input through the Q&A. So without further ado, let me welcome Vincent Ryan, and thank you, Vincent, and you're very welcome.
Thanks, Grania. Can you hear me okay there?
Yes, perfectly. Yeah,
great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks, Grania, thanks, Muireann, and thanks to everyone who's come along today to join us here on this webinar to to kind of really discuss this topic, identifying feelings, and to look at that. So I'm just going to pop my slides. My slides, are they visible now, Grania? Yeah. So
yeah. Just put them into presentation mode, Vincent.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks. So here we are. So this is our topic. So we're going to just have a look at these slides. I'll talk a little bit around them, and this hopefully will kind of stimulate some thoughts, some reflections, maybe some questions. So let's begin. So what are feelings? Feelings are fundamental to our experience of being human. I mean, it'd be hard to imagine being human and not having feelings. So it's absolutely essential to all of us. We all have these kind of private, personal, subjective experiences inside our bodies and our minds. And we can also have lots of questions about, like, what is the nature of feelings and how do we identify them? So one of the first things to kind of think about is how thinking and feeling are often contrasted. And I found this meme online. This is Mr. Spock from Star Trek. And this is kind of like, you know, a humorous thing here: disregard emotion, acquire logic. Sometimes in our culture, we prioritize logic and reason and kind of see it as kind of better than emotion and feeling. And yet today, I think we're going to see how important feeling is and how emotion kind of is the driver. And actually thoughts and logic and so on is sort of what comes after to refine those kind of basic feelings and needs. So the chicken and egg here is kind of the idea of thinking and feeling again. So like this is a French philosopher, René Descartes, in 1641. He said, "I think, therefore I am." So he was like really prioritizing the importance of thinking. We're thinking machines, he sometimes said. But nowadays, we're kind of more and more realizing, you know, actually, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. So Peter Levine here in 2015 said, "I sense, I feel, I perceive, and that I reason. Therefore, I'm alive and real." And this is perhaps more where we're shifting into now. This idea of sensing, feeling, perceiving comes first to make us alive and real. And then we also reason around that. So the chicken and egg question about thinking and feeling is you could argue is answered, because we see here with the baby with the dog, the baby here is feeling as the dog is feeling, and then thinking will come later for this child. So we've all been babies at one stage, every one of us. So we began life feeling. We felt either safe or scared, or we felt, you know, tired, cranky, you know, relaxed, happy. That all came before we kind of got into the reasoning and the logic and figuring things out. I just like this quote here from Antonio Damasio. He says, "We are not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think." So this is a book that came out in the 70s called Man Watching by Desmond Morris. There's been a huge interest in looking and observing people's body language to try and understand what's going on for somebody inside, to understand their feelings, their attitudes. So we know we feel our feelings in our body, each one of us, but we can also directly observe other people's body language and try to discern or to deduce what they're feeling. And sometimes we get that right. Sometimes it's kind of obvious when someone's feeling sad or angry, but sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes we kind of think we know what someone feels from their body language, but we mightn't be sure. We might need to ask them. So feelings are very bound up with the idea of the body, as I just said, but they also shape our sense of self and our identity. So Freud, for example, here in 1923 said, "The self is first and foremost a bodily ego." And he was thinking of the baby here again. So Freud is very interested in how babies and children develop their identity, their ego, their sense of self. And he recognized it was really grounded in feeling in the body. And this is proved to be true when neuroscientist Antonio Damasio says, it's when you have a feeling that you begin to have a mind and a self. So Freud is right 100 years ago about this particular point. So we can also think of feelings as kind of like a basic compass which directs us through life, directs our attention to what we need to do to take care of ourselves. So I like this image of feelings as a compass. And John Friedrichson's a wonderful psychotherapist, and he says, feelings are the fundamental way we make sense of the world. When we do not know what we feel, we go through life without an emotional compass. So you see here on the left, like, you know, if we're happy, that's going to move us towards certain behaviors, certain, you know, directions. If we're feeling calm, that'll govern how we behave, what we do, how we relate to others. If we're afraid, that'll also direct us maybe away from things we're scared of, or to look for support or comfort if we're feeling fear. And the same goes with the other emotions as well. So what is the function of feelings? So what I'm really trying to kind of bring up here today is that feelings are adaptive. They move us to action to meet our basic needs. So in order to like survive as beings in the world, we need our feelings. For example, we feel love, there's an impulse to move towards. We feel fear, there can be an impulse to move away. If we feel anger, there can be an impulse to confront, to solve a problem. And feelings are really linked to this idea of attachment. Like we all form bonds with each other. We all have friendships, relationships, families. So feelings really inform how we form attachments to other people. That's things like love, remorse if we fall out or we have a problem. Also anger and hate when somebody that we love lets us down, and we need to kind of address that. So from birth and all throughout our lives, feelings really, really shape how we relate to others. So then where do we learn about our feelings? Like we don't get a manual when we're born. We're not born with a kind of a, hey, this is how you make sense of your feelings. So we have to kind of learn about our feelings somewhere. So where do we learn about it? Well, first and foremost, we learn it about our feelings in our family of origin, our caretakers. They kind of teach us and help us to understand what feelings are about. Irish culture that we grow up in, or if you grow up in a different culture, if you're attending here today from a different country, your culture shapes how you understand feelings. Different cultures have different attitudes to feelings. For example, maybe in certain like Mediterranean countries, maybe passion and anger is kind of seen as more kind of, welcome or, normal. Whereas perhaps in more, Germanic or Scandinavian countries, it's much more coolness. There's a kind of a different attitude. These are kind of real generalizations now. Our peer culture really shapes how we understand our feelings. We see how our friends relate to their feelings, how they talk about their sadness or their frustration. That really shapes how we understand feelings. Popular culture is hugely influential. I have here a picture of Family Ties. This is a popular kind of, TV show from America when I was growing up. And, we grew up watching how other families related to one another in other countries. So this would shape our kind of wondering about, so that's how people relate to their feelings here. Maybe they talk about certain feelings that my family doesn't talk about. Self-development. There's a huge, kind of motivation now among a lot of people to go and discover more about their feelings, watching YouTube videos, reading self-help books. And then online support forums like what Mirren offers is another place that people can go to kind of talk about their feelings and to inquire and to share with others, like, what their experience of dealing with their emotions is like. And of course, therapy is another place where we go to learn about our feelings and to understand what's going on inside with our feelings, which is what MyMind really offers and what I offer as well. So going back to where we learn about our feelings, family is the first place we learn about our feelings. And one of the things we can think about in our family of origin is what were permitted feelings and what were prohibited feelings. So for example, maybe it was not safe to feel and express anger in your family, or maybe, sadness was something that was shamed or teased. Maybe anxiety was something that made other people uncomfortable, and we realized that. So we kind of hid that, or we didn't know how to be with that because it didn't feel good or safe to feel that way in our family. So the thing about this is when we have feelings that are not permitted, we can wind up feeling alone with them. And that's what this photo here that I picked up on kind of shows. This is a young woman who's clearly like feeling, well, I would say sad. It looks like she looks sad, that maybe she's alone with a difficult feeling. So here's a, bit of Irish culture here. It's a couple of rugby players from the Irish team. And we can see here their body language, they're exuding lots of feeling. And, sport is a place that I think, particularly in Irish culture, but in all cultures, more or less, it's a place where there's huge permission to feel feelings, like to get angry with the team or the other team, get angry with the ref, feel sad when your team loses, to be anxious before the game starts. There's a huge permission to feel and express feeling in sport, which is interesting. Maybe we'll pick up on that later on. And then there's this common Irish question we say sometimes to each other: how are you? How's it going? I was talking to an American client recently, and she said, yeah, that's a really American thing as well. How are you? How are you feeling? But often we say it in a kind of a disingenuous, or kind of a kind of a way that's kind of insincere, not in a bad way, but just kind of, we're not really asking the question. And I've heard of funny incidents where people from another culture get asked by an Irish person, how's it going? And they feel like they're being genuinely asked, like, how are you? And will actually pause and start talking about how they feel. And this can actually throw Irish people sometimes to be like, oh, you're really answering my question about how you feel. So this is something about Irish culture and some other cultures that we can kind of think about. So this slide here is just about feelings and context. So like, feelings always exist in some context. You know, we can never really think about anger just existing without, well, who's angry with who or what, or who's sad about what and where and when, what happened. So we're always thinking about feelings in some context. There's always thinking going on as well. There's also behaviors, and it's happening somewhere, probably with other people, or other things are going on. It's kind of a useful way to think about feelings. Worth asking, why am I having these feelings here and now? The basic feeling contrast is between threat and safety, also pain and pleasure, discomfort and ease. So this is a really important way to think about feelings, that we kind of know in our bodies, kind of like that there's some level of comfort or discomfort, threat, kind of dis-ease, like literally lack of ease, versus a feeling of calm, safety. It's kind of the basic feeling contrast. Then we can also think about primary feelings. So when we're thinking about identifying feelings, some feelings are universal, and the body language kind of goes along with them. So like, for example, in all cultures around the world, these kind of faces are recognized by people who look at them, including very primitive cultures. They'll say, oh yeah, that's fear, the lady on the top right, or, you know, that's a disgust. So these feelings are really like hardwired into us, unless there's some kind of, kind of genetic, kind of, I don't know, kind of illness or something like that. But everybody kind of pretty much has these feelings in all cultures. Then we can think about secondary feelings. These are feelings that arise in reaction to other feelings. So a secondary feeling could be like, when I feel angry, then I feel scared, I feel afraid. Anger could be like experienced as a threatening feeling to oneself. So it's like, oh, it's not safe to feel angry. Or when I feel sad, I feel ashamed. And that might, again, link back to family of origin. If it wasn't okay to be sad, maybe this shame comes up, for example. We can also think about social feelings. Many feelings are very much to do with how we feel about other people. Now, the primary feelings can be that too, but these ones here, for example, like shame, guilt, envy, jealousy, pride, empathy, kindness, we see here that feelings are very often related to other people and how we compare ourselves to other people and how we can feel kindness or, maybe a lack of kindness towards others. So this picture here on the left, I liked. It's like there's two women here having a chat, and it looks like one is speaking, the other is listening. So making sense of feelings, we often need to reflect and think about them. So again, this is where thinking is in the service of feeling, kind of sorting out our feelings, understanding our feelings, talking about our feelings. So talking about our feelings with a suitable person can help us to sort through and make sense of our feelings. And this is again where, services like Muireann's The Good Limbo and MyMind really can be a place to go and to sort out, how do I feel, or what's going on with these feelings I'm having. So this is just a very simple kind of take on how feelings can be both adaptive or maladaptive. So we've looked at how feelings are basically adaptive, like they help us to live and survive and navigate the world. They are a compass, but they can also become maladaptive. For example, like if a feeling gets stuck, like chronic anger, if it's a constant feeling of frustration, it's kind of like that's going to be very stressful. It's not going to be very good for a person. It's going to be hard on their relationships, hard on them. So it might be kind of something to kind of really look at, like what's behind that. Toxic shame is another one. You know, often when we grow up in an environment where we feel like we're kind of defective, or other people don't really appreciate us or don't understand us, we can come away with a basic feeling of I'm not okay. And that feeling of shame, of relating to oneself as kind of disgusting or not okay, it's very painful. You know, there is such a thing as healthy shame, which is kind of recognizing, okay, you know, there's something about the way I'm doing things I really need to examine, maybe change. But toxic shame is like that feeling of I'm fundamentally flawed, right down to the bone. And that's a very, very difficult thing to deal with. Complex grief is another area where there's some loss. It's never been fully kind of gotten over. The person may need to kind of explore that, really kind of let go of those feelings, understand about the loss to really kind of move forward in their lives. So I just say here, sometimes we need to explore, talk about, understand our feelings in order to make them adaptive again, so we can kind of move forward in our lives. And I just put in this slide here. I just really like this therapist. His name is Peter Fonagy. And I just say being alone with difficult feelings can be a real problem. So the aloneness of feelings, not being able to talk to somebody, not feeling safe enough to kind of explore one's feelings, to kind of sort them out, can be a real problem. So this idea of undoing aloneness is sometimes what we're looking at doing in psychotherapy, but also, you know, in places like the Good Limbo. And then I just love this quote here. I'm fond of saying, Peter Fonagy, I'm fond of saying that adversity turns into trauma when you experience your mind as being alone. If you have good relationships, they actually help you assimilate your experience. So this is a really, really important thing we're doing here today. We're actually, you know, this is the purpose, I think, of our talk as well, is to look at this way we can kind of process and understand our experience of our feelings. So that's it for me with the presentation. We're going to look at discussion and questions, and I'll hand you back to Grania now.
Thanks very much indeed, Vincent, and that was really interesting and really helpful. And thanks also to Muireann for her earlier input. And just like to apologise to people, I didn't hit a particular button on the slides, so the audio didn't play. But just to say, if you were able to read the subtitles, that's what the chap that does the voiceover was saying. So it's not all is not lost, as we say. So yeah, so guys, that's really interesting stuff. And I don't know about you, Muireann, but I just picked up on a couple of things that Vincent talked about there in relation to, you touched on family of origin stuff quite a bit, Vincent. And I'm interested, you know, you as a professional psychotherapist, to get your sense of, you know, it's that whole nature nurture argument again. But just wondering what you think, how much of it is that and how much of it is, you know, going to school and becoming a teenager and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll hand back over to Muireann to get her views on it.
Yeah, sure, Grania. I mean, we know now that, you know, it is a mixture. I mean, the idea that it would just be one wouldn't even make sense. So we all have a personality or a temperament when we're born. And anyone who's been around children and babies know this. Like, some babies will be more kind of easy to settle, and others will be more fretting, maybe kind of more anxious. So we all do have a basic temperament. And of course, that then interacts with our family of origin and our environment, and how that environment reacts to our temperament, whether it kind of exacerbates maybe our naturally nervous or anxious kind of temperament, or kind of soothes it, you know, that does really matter. Like, so there's always this kind of interweaving between nature and nurture that we know now for a fact is real, you know. So just wondering what Muireann
Yeah,
would,
so Muireann, from the Good Limbo's perspective, what's your sense of that?
I think it's really quite interesting. I have this conversation with people sometimes, because it's, you know, it's kind of like that. What came first? Would I have always been predisposed to being anxious or feeling a certain way? Like, I think for me, I probably was predisposed to being anxious. I was always an anxious child. And then you might have things that happen in life that kind of compound that. And I think a lot of people kind of feel that maybe they would have had it, but maybe they would have managed it better had other things not happened in their life, kind of, you know, subsequently. So I think it's quite interesting.
So the other thing that you touched on there as well, Vincent, in terms of the whole, I suppose, look, I'm from a small town in the west of Ireland, and I would have spent a lot of time growing up, and not saying this to blame anybody, but there would have been a lot of Asher, you'll be grand, you know, Asher, you're all right. And, you know, and that was the way that my parents were brought up, etc. And I suppose I'm just wondering, you know, how does it very much depend on the individual? And I'm probably asking you how long is a piece of string now, but when you become so familiar with a particular way of being, it can seem almost impossible to, if you like, recover from that, if I could put it that way. What do you think of, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like that attitude of like, Ashley would be grand. You know, if a person's kind of obviously nervous or anxious or a bit down and the response is, Ashley be grand, there's kind of a dismissing going on there. Now, I'm not saying that in a really cruel or deliberate way, but maybe the other person's uncomfortable or they feel a little bit like unsure about how to inquire and to say to the person, oh, you seem a bit down today, you seem a bit anxious. But that attitude, that outside attitude of, you be grand, don't think about that, don't worry about that, we can internalize that then in time. So we end up relating to ourselves that way. So in other words, like a part of us that gets anxious kind of can stir up this other part that's kind of dismissing that, saying, you know, listen, don't give that any heed, or, you know, just ignore that. But you see, ignoring feelings is part of the problem, because sometimes that works in the short term. But often when people come to therapy or they really kind of struggle, it's because there's been too much of that dismissing an anxiety or a depression or some loss. So we can think about how the external experience of the other person can over time get internalized, and we end up relating to ourselves with that kind of attitude, you know, which doesn't really help generally.
Yeah, Maureen, what's your thoughts on that?
I think when you do like internalize feelings like that as well, they can bubble up, you know, some way or another. There's kind of like that feelings in the body and stuff sometimes, like anxiety, and you could be ignoring it and it can manifest in like stomach problems or, you know, panic attacks or things like that. When you know, keep trying to push those feelings down, they kind of find their own way to express themselves, I think.
Yeah, and do you find with many members of your community that some of their challenges come from not being allowed to express feelings in a safe and healthy way, and then, as Vincent says, the word I would use is minimizing them?
Yeah,
I'll be grand. Yeah,
I think a lot of people probably have that experience. I think it's starting to change. Like, I think mental health is being so stigmatized. I think a lot of people really have that experience with feelings, and I'm starting to notice a little bit of a trend with like my siblings and my nieces and stuff, with their children are a bit more open and receptive to listening to kind of how they're feeling and getting them help early, which I think is really, you know, a positive thing, and hopefully is a change we're starting to see.
Yeah. So look, we have a couple of questions, and I'm going, if you don't mind, Vincent, to direct them to you. Yeah. So I don't have any names, but one person wants to know, how do you identify feelings other than talking to another? Are there other techniques that you can share?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, just checking in with the body, and you know, kind of like asking yourself, you know, could this be anger? Could this be sadness? Could this be fear? Like, you know, I mentioned the primary feelings there. So that kind of self-inquiry is definitely very, very possible and very useful. like anger often shows up as a kind of energy in the chest and the arms and the jaw, kind of a frustration. Sadness sometimes is a kind of sinking feeling. You know, I suppose fear can show up as kind of maybe the heart beating a bit faster, or kind of the thoughts racing. These are some ways that, you know, we can kind of look for markers or kind of sort of signals that, okay, maybe I'm actually scared. Maybe that's the main thing I'm feeling, is I'm really scared, like I'm really worried about this. So I would say the first thing is to go into the body, maybe ask, is it this, is it that? You know, that's one way to do it. You know.
Excellent. That sounds like a good plan. Muireann, this topic was suggested by members of your community. So obviously, you know, I'm reading into that question there that the person might not want to talk to somebody else. So have members of your community, just along the lines of what Vincent was saying there, have they devised other techniques? Because I know, for example, one of the things you guys run is an arcade, a gaming arcade. What do you think?
Yeah, I think even with expressing feelings, like sometimes it's that reaction to the feelings can help you identify almost what they are. So I know a lot of our members will be fans of like computer games, and I think that could be really helpful for people feeling angry. You know, maybe the shooter games or things like that. If you're feeling angry, it's a way to express it in a healthy environment. Because I think sometimes we can almost run away from feelings like anger. Feels like a bad feeling, a negative feeling, but you know, actually it's a feeling as valid as any other, and there are healthy ways to express it. So I think sometimes it's the reaction to the feeling can help you almost identify what it is, like what you kind of want to do with that can help you kind of tap into well what it is that you are actually feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Muireann. I think that people identify, I know certainly people I would talk to, and I would myself, that things like shame and anger and sadness, that these are all somehow bad, and that I shouldn't be engaging in them in any way, shape or form, and that this makes me a bad person when I'm experiencing these feelings. Thoughts on that, Vincent?
Yeah, well, this is what I was saying. I think, you know, picking up on your point there, Grania, that we have these secondary reactions to our feelings, and Muireann, you're saying this as well. That often it's like, oh, I'm feeling angry, that must mean I'm a bad person, or I'm weak, or you know, I'm going to do something now that I'm going to be ashamed of. But actually, you know, recognizing that we all have all our feelings. Like everybody feels anger at some stage. Everyone feels sad sometimes. Everyone feels frightened or scared sometimes. Like these are actually really healthy, you know, and we can feel the impulse to act on them, like you're saying, Muireann, and we can find, you know, kind of safe and healthy ways to act them out. Like, you know, like sport is ritualized warfare. It's like, it's a way to act out a lot of anger, a lot of like, you know, aggression, but also assertiveness, power, you know, kind of really finding your force, your bodily force in the world. There's an awful lot of value in all that. There's really healthy ways to channel those feelings. So we can find positive outlets for all these feelings and kind of recognize, actually, you know what, I need access to all my feelings because they all are adaptive. That's what I would say about that, you know.
Very good. So listen, we've lots of questions coming in, which is great. So I'll just take a couple more here, and I think this is really interesting to me anyway. And I might start with you, Vincent, in terms of an answer. How do you learn to identify why you feel a certain way if you don't see a trigger for it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can just begin by asking what happened before. Like, you know, track back what happened maybe in the last few hours, the last day, and how did you feel about that? So for example, like, let's take an example. You feel a certain way. Let's say you feel frustrated. And then it's like, okay, I don't know the trigger, but what happened, say, earlier today? What happened yesterday? Was there a moment where someone did something, or I remembered? Maybe it was just a very quickly remembering some kind of insult or some kind of slight or some kind of being left out of something. And I find, and my clients generally find, that it does come, that there is something, there's some source out there, some stimulus or inside that we remember or that we fantasize about, that is the source of the feeling. So it can be found, but sometimes there's a process of inquiring and being kind of open to being like, you know, maybe I need to be a bit vulnerable here with myself and say, yeah, you know, actually it does hurt my feelings when I get left out of something, because that makes me feel vulnerable or weak. So it might be hard to access that because we mightn't like how that makes us feel about ourselves. But the value then is kind of like, well, now I know. Now I know, yeah, that really bugged me when I was left out of that thing. But we can all feel that. I mean, that's just really human. And then once we know that, then we can, you know, we can address that with ourselves. And we might want to, you know, kind of bring that up in some way with somebody else, or we may not, you know, so.
Yeah, so sorry, no, I was a bit quick on the trigger there with Murren. Murren, presumably you'd agree with Vincent's points there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes as well, and we nearly forget, but feelings can have, you know, physical causes and things too. Like people might be feeling a bit depressed and actually as a result of illness or things like that as well. So it's always worth, you know, checking in with a GP and just checking, you know, why you might be feeling, you know, sometimes you don't even think of that. Actually, there's some other cause for how it is that you're feeling as well, that it's not always a response to something that's happened.
So absolutely, and for anybody who's been following Joe Duffy for the last week or so, menopause amongst women is obviously a source of anxiety and depression that people have been fobbing off for years, men and women alike. So that's a good point, Murren. I'm just going to press on now with questions because they're coming in thick and fast. So Helen is wondering, can therapy be damaging in some cases when we go through feelings that are very toxic for us? That's a really good question. Vincent, I might hand that to you, please.
Yeah. I mean, look, therapy is very powerful, and we can't underestimate that. And there is such a thing as iatrogenic trauma, which is trauma that's as a result of therapy or medical interventions. So, you know, there's a huge amount of responsibility on someone like me or counselors, psychotherapists like me to do these things in a safe way. So, you know, all feelings and experience, you know, needs to be approached as either potentially re-traumatizing, or, you know, there's a kind of a curative, or there's a kind of a healing aspect to it. So, like, there's a reason why we avoid toxic feelings and very painful memories and experiences, because we're trying to protect ourselves from the damaging effect of those. So, you know, someone like me has to really respect that. And you and everybody else here, we all need to respect that sometimes we do need to kind of, like, you know, manage the impact of certain feelings and experiences so they don't kind of spill out and we kind of act out of them, or we just get really sick with them. So, I mean, therapy needs to be structured in a way that's very safe and gentle and paced. So, like, you know, someone like me would be really, like, attending to that with a person. And we can all do that with ourselves about, like, you know, this needs to be, you know, something different needs to happen here. This toxic feeling or this terrible memory or whatever needs to be addressed in a way that leads to some kind of change that's positive, that's not just going to lead to a feeling of helplessness, a feeling of shame, a feeling of, you know, frustration. So that is very much built into therapy, that we know this now, that it's not just let it all hang out kind of thing, you know.
Excellent. Thanks a million, Vincent, because I know that some people, because I've talked to them down the years, are afraid to go to therapy because they're afraid of what it might uncover. And, you know, they're I suppose, willing to live within the silence of what's going on for them. A few more coming in here now. So Anonymous says, need to be careful with words used around feelings such as grief, such as get over it. And it's not something that someone gets over. And I think we've covered that already. So thank you for that comment. Anne has said, I enjoyed this talk. At the beginning, the phrase medical intervention was used. That brought up a load of emotions nearly 13 years on. Is there any chance this country could learn about open dialogue that really focuses on involving the person in decision making? So, Muireann, I might give that to you. I know the Mental Health Commission has been doing a lot of work in recent times on that, so you might speak to that.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone about this during the week as well, and like they are trying to move to a more person-centered approach to things, and I think that's really important because two people might have, say, the same diagnosis or the same mental health problem, but that doesn't mean they experience it in the same way. It's very, very different, and that doesn't mean that what works for them to help them recover is the same. So some people might find, I think everybody has a different combination of things, be it therapy, medication, exercise, diet, and the combination of those things together for each person is different. It's almost like a recipe, and finding the right recipe for any one person, I think, is different. So it's really important that we are moving towards that. And I think we are, I think it's been recognised, and I think it's probably a little bit slower than we'd like, but I think it is starting to move in that direction.
Yeah, thanks for that, Muireann. That would be my sense of it as well from stuff I'm reading, and I think there's actually an act of the Oireachtas. I'm not sure where it's at the moment, but just to say to you, Anne, that is moving in that direction. Marion is wondering, and this a really good question as well, and I'd say so many of us have had this situation. My question would be, how can you help someone who never talks about their feelings but is totally near a breakdown? When I start talking about it, they always have excuses. So I might get you to deal with that, Vincent, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, when a person is, as you say, perhaps very, very fragile and maybe, just barely holding it together, maybe kind of going towards feelings in that moment might be too much. So it might be more about kind of talking about, other things around, what's going on for them, like, how are they managing, maybe their day, or, what are they doing for themselves that's kind of like helping them take care of themselves, and maybe kind of conveying that sense of acceptance, like, that I can see that, you're really struggling, and I'm here, and, whenever you're ready to open up, I'll be here. But maybe that need to kind of get the person to talk about their feelings, it may be just that they're scared, they're too scared actually to go near that at the moment, and to kind of maybe respect that and to kind of meet them in other ways, maybe just to talk to them about more neutral things, just to give them that sense of support.
Excellent. And Vincent, I'm going to stay with you if that's okay. Anonymous is asking, what do you think about CBT, changing the thought to change the feeling?
Yeah, I mean, CBT is one model of therapy that I trained in, among others. I think it's good, but it's limited as well. It's not the whole story. We can change our thoughts. We can work on our thoughts, and that will help us feel better. But sometimes we can work directly on the feelings themselves, kind of, like check in with how we're feeling, talk about, the ways that we felt when certain things happened, and just get really down into the feelings. So there's a thing called emotion-focused therapy, which is a very, very evidence-based, as well as, CBT is evidence-based, and it kind of makes emotions more primary. So I suppose the answer I would say is that it's like, again, it's a chicken and the egg, like we kind of, which comes first? Some would say that the feelings actually are primary and the thoughts kind of catch up, but we know we can shape our feelings with our thoughts as well. So it's kind of like, it's the way I would work is with both. It's not like one's better than the other, but I mean, sometimes I don't think holding one therapy up as a holy grail is the answer, in my opinion,
And Muireann, just on that, you obviously have a very wide-ranging community of people. Presumably CPT is used and other forms, and then there's more clinical diagnosis, etc. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I've had CPT myself, and actually sometimes even using the simplistic example of myself, I used to hate having double French on a Friday when I was in school. And eventually I learned to change my attitude and look forward to going to it, because I was just going to be miserable going to French every Friday, and I had to go anyway. So I think sometimes, you know, it definitely, but like I was saying about the recipe, everybody is different, and what works for people as an individual, you know, is different, and there's such a wide range of therapeutic interventions, and depending on what somebody is going through and what their experiences are, and just them as an individual, and what works for them as an individual will be different for everyone. Some people find mindfulness really helpful, and some people want to hit you when you bring up the thought of mindfulness because they're sick of hearing about it, you know. So everybody, I think, is different. And
I'm conscious that we're coming to the end of the hour now. So it's a complex area, there's no question about it, because as Vincent said, we all have feelings, and then we all have different ways that we were brought up to deal with feelings, or not to deal with them, as the case may be, and then they surface in adulthood. I know that has been the case in my life. You know, there have been situations that I have struggled to cope with, and in fact I have gone into therapy from time to time, and I have found it very helpful. But I suppose I would say, just, you know, from my own personal experience, and Vincent, you might give us a short piece on this just before we finish, is that, you know, they talk in physical terms about we know our own bodies, and it doesn't help to ignore symptoms of something. And particularly, they say the earlier you can get a symptom of something and examine it, the better the outcomes will be. I believe the same is true for mental health. And I think, unfortunately, that the stigma that has surrounded it for so long has meant that people put off having these conversations. And obviously, you know, look, I work for MyMind, and Muireann is involved in the Good Limbo. We're not talking about those particular services, we're talking about in general, and making sure that the organisation that you go to, if you decide to go for counselling to explore some of your feelings, is a reputable either individual or whatever, and they have clear qualifications. What's your view on that, Vincent?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think what I'd say is that as human beings, we're all vulnerable. You know, we all can get sick, get sad, get fed up, feel defeated. We can all lose people that we love. We can all lose jobs. You know, things cannot work out. So loss is part of being human. And so we're very vulnerable beings. Like, we're, you know, there's something vulnerable about just having a body that can go wrong. You know, we can get sick and so on. So it's baked into the cake that vulnerability is part of being human. And of course, that brings up lots of strong emotions: frustration, sadness, shame, you know, guilt, you know, fear. And I suppose one thing we're always doing is we're always trying to read other people to see, is this a safe person to be vulnerable with? If I tell this person, yeah, I'm really scared about, you know, this big meeting that's coming up, are they going to shame me? Are they going to make me feel worse? Because I already feel bad, I feel scared. Or are they going to help me with this? So I think we go through life with this kind of basic question: is this a safe place to explore feelings? Or is this a place where I'm just going to feel worse about myself? So I suppose when we think about workplaces and that, we're always asking ourselves those questions, aren't we? You know,
yeah,
and all kinds of sort of locations, you know.
And speaking of safe places, Muireann, the Good Limbo.
Yeah, I think we always try to make it a safe space, and, you know, let the members contribute to what they want. And we have our volunteer moderators who are fantastic as well, but we try to encourage people to, I suppose everybody is over 16, so to take a bit of ownership themselves. And if something gets a bit heavy in general, as happens sometimes, that people feel confident to ask people, would you mind moving because that topic's a little bit heavy for me, or things like that, which is really good, I think, because I think it's important to learn to ask for what we need as well, which I think can really help people.
Yeah, and I think that's it in a nutshell, isn't it, really, Muireann? It's about understanding ourselves, what we need, and then, you know, finding the space and the courage to ask for it, whether it's in a family setting or with friends or in a formal therapeutic setting. So look, we've come to we're just over the hour now, in fact. And hopefully everybody who was on the call with us this morning got something useful out of it. And I'd like to thank everybody who engaged with the questions. We really appreciate that, as always. Just to remind you then that the video will be available on the YouTube channel on MyMinds and on the Good Limbo probably from the middle of next week, but you will receive an email reminder with the link. I also, before we go, just want to let people know, in case you're interested, that the next MyMind webinar is on Monday the 24th, which is Monday week. And we're doing a big shake-up. We're changing the day and the time. And it's at lunchtime, and that's to facilitate people who mightn't have the flexibility and might want to attend during lunchtime. And we're going to be covering the topic of addiction, which again, like identifying feelings, it's a very weighty topic, but there will be registration details available on that over the next few days. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for participating with your time this morning. I'd like to especially thank Vincent and Warren for, and there's some nice pieces coming in there from some of the attendees. So until the next time, please do look after yourselves and look after each other. Thanks very much indeed.